Am I actually live?
You're
Are we
live.
good?
Mhm.
Okay. All right. So we're doing this. Hey, folks, and thanks for joining us, everyone, and welcome to a segment that I like to call Side Quests. My two guests here today are content creators, and there aren't many of them who fit this description, but they're creators whose videos are like automatic watches for me. Watching Mike is like hanging out with an old friend who shares your taste in books. And he's just so good at it and so solid. The goat of BookTube, I call him. And Johanna, her videos are always so thoughtful and probing. You always feel like you are going on an intellectual journey with a friend when you watch her videos. So thanks for being here, guys.
Well, thanks for the invite. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Yes, same here. My pleasure.
Yeah, you got it. Absolutely. So wait, Mike, you just got back from vacation. How was that?
Very nice, very nice. Hard to come back. You know, that kind, the type, you hold your passport like in your hand while you're in the ocean. You're just thinking I could just, just never come back. But,
It's funny because I just got back from Texas from my vacation, which was to
Right.
Texas.
which I'm sure was also lovely.
How was it?
It was fun. I mean, I was with family. It was in Lubbock, Texas, so not as much to do as
Been through a few
Houston,
times, yeah.
but it was a good time being with family.
How
Sure.
far away is that from Houston?
Oh, it's quite a ways.
It's a good 8 to 11 hour drive. I have a friend that went to Texas Tech up there, and it was, I think when we hung out, gosh, it was a good, I don't know, 8 to 10 hour car drive, depending on who was driving.
That's a huge state.
It
Yeah.
is such a massive state.
Yeah, we when we were younger, I lived in Atlanta, and we'd come visit family out here, and that was like the same length of car drive as it is to go from Houston to El Paso, which is still in Texas. So.
Yeah. My parents live about 45 minutes from El Paso, so they drove out to visit us in Lubbock. But yeah, it's just crazy how far away everything is, and yet close at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah. So I thought, guys, I would start with this. I've been wanting to ask you guys this because you're both kind of veterans of BookTube. You saw the thumbnail. It was gladiators of BookTube. I don't know why I think of you guys that way, but why don't you tell me what is the biggest lesson that you guys have learned thus far doing what you do? You guys are both, make videos, usually more than once a week. Sometimes that varies. What's something that you were maybe naive about when you started making videos? And like, how have you changed your mind over time in terms of this? Like, so what's a lesson you've learned about doing this? Mike, you want to start?
No, ladies first. Go
No.
ahead.
No. I feel like when he's saying veteran.
I should have known, Mike. Southern gentleman. I love it. Why don't we put Johanna on the spot?
No.
Yeah.
I haven't been doing this as long as Mike, for one. And wow, I mean, so your question is more about content creation, or
Yeah. What doing BookTube as an art, as a hobby, as a venture? What have you learned over time, over your years of doing this? Like, what were you naive about at the beginning that you kind of like over time you were like, wow, I can't believe I thought it was this way, but I've learned a lesson.
I don't know. I don't know a good answer to that question in a way. I mean, I've learned a lot of things. If you watch my first video, it's pretty bad. Like I did it.
No.
I did it on a laptop. I did it on my AirBook at the time with the microphone settings of the AirBook. So it's just very pixelated. The sound quality's bad. My background looks bad. I still don't feel like I still feel like I have a lot to learn when it comes to the production side of things, when it comes to the technical side of things. I'm still trying to learn that stuff, to be honest with you. I just am not an expert in that way. But I do think that I have grown a lot over the last few years. If you watch my early videos versus now, even my husband has been impressed and doesn't yawn through my videos as he once did. And I do think I've gotten better at talking about books, about being able to explore not only the themes of the book, but also just being able to relay the experience of reading a book. And I think that I can tell my audience, the comment section seems to reflect that I'm getting better at that, because I get some very nice comments, at least for my side of the community. And so I think I've been just slowly over time learning a little bit every year about how to maybe make my videos a little bit more aesthetic, a little bit more visually pleasing, making my points a little bit more supported, being able to speak a little bit more fluidly. And And yeah, I mean, I wish I could give you a more articulate answer than that. I guess I'm still learning things, but yeah, it's a wonderful journey, and it is fun to do it for a long period of time and start to notice your growth along the way.
Yeah. So it sounds like you approach it like a craft. That's how I do it. Mike came out of the womb just being a booktuber. Like he was born and then there was just a mic that popped up in front of him and he
No,
just
not at
started
all.
going.
Not at all.
But for those of us who aren't as talented, it took a little bit of work to figure out like how to talk to a camera because, you know, I'm not a total sociopath. So like, you know, like for some reason it still feels awkward to talk to a camera lens. And to try to like hold my thoughts in my head while I'm not looking someone in the eye. When I teach classes, my goodness gracious, I can just go. Something freezes me up when I stare into a camera lens, and I think I'm overcoming that. I think that's part of the craft of it. Mike, what about you, man?
No, it was not. I mean, here I am in year 5 and I'm still learning new things. I mean, so to think that, you know, like you said, come out of the womb, know how to do it. No, the thing that helped me was I podcasted for like a decade before I did this. So also that helps you be a better speaker, how to better space your words out and how to not stutter and be able to make a video for 20 minutes without having any cuts and things like that. So that helps. But no, I'm always learning new things. As far as like, what did I think when I started that I kind of like learned about? I guess I just thought no one would ever have any interest in giving a damn about what I was reading, you know, and to learn that there was that world out there where there were people that read the same kind of books that I did and was interested in hearing things like that was just kind of surreal to me because I did several other things before, but it was never talking about books. I got more of like, even from my best friends, like, what are you reading for? Not what are you reading, but what are you reading for was kind of the questions that I used to get. So I never really thought that was an outlet for things like that. So that's why I did, you know, just talk about media and sports, things I knew that, you know, common people would talk about. But as far as like what I've learned, I think just one thing I learned for sure, and I can't tell people this enough, is if you wouldn't say it in real life, don't say it on a YouTube channel because it'll find a way to bite you in the ass eventually. And even though I joked yesterday that I can just blame it on saying it was a deep fake, I don't think that will work very often, especially for someone like me. So just, you know, remember, just be careful what you say and don't go live if you can't have a buffer. I shouldn't be saying that if I'm going live. Sure.
Yeah. I've noticed there's like 2 types of booktubers, and I don't know like where I fit in that. There are the booktubers that like they'll read a book and they'll go in and they'll talk and they'll explain all the themes and they kind of want to teach their audience, and it's almost like information transmission or teaching or something like that. And then there are booktubers who are just so interesting as people that they just talk about what they're reading. They do reading vlogs, and people will watch them reading their books on their couch. No one would do that for me. I actually have to say, like there are just people who are inherently like captivating. I think you're one of those people, Mike, where people just want to follow you and read what you're reading. And I think Johanna probably straddles both lines. She's interesting enough to go that way, but there's a lot of substance there too. Same with you, Mike. But I don't think I'm very interesting. So like, for me, it's been the explainer mode, and I'm trying to get out of that. Where do you think you sit along that spectrum?
No, I disagree. I think I'm a low IQ channel when I listen to someone like you and Philip and Christopher talk, and I'm like, what am I even saying? You know, they're talking about all the stuff that I'm not even talking about when I discuss anything about books. So no, I think I guess you would call it like more of an everyman, because be honest, a lot of people aren't going to be talking about some of the deep dive stuff that you guys talk about because we just don't see it that way. And I like to listen to that because I like to learn, you know, stuff that I like. When I talk to Philip, I'm like, I never saw that. Well, talking about One Piece, I'm like, I never saw. I saw, yes, pirates punching people in the face. Yeah, it's cool. And Philip's like talking about these great underlying themes and stuff. I'm like, I guess I never really saw it that way. So I appreciate there are other people who make content like that, because for me, that's great. I feel like I can learn stuff. Whereas if someone's watching me, they hear what I like about the book. I don't feel like they're learning too much, but you know, hey, there's a certain type of video out there for everyone, right?
You're an everyman. That is true, and that's what we like about you. But you're also an everyman that's read like thousands of books, Mike.
I am
that makes you not an
Harris of the
everyman.
group. I have no actual talent, but I hold everyone together. There we go, Xander Harris.
What about you, Johanna?
Yeah, this is an interesting topic because I know when I was fairly new to having a channel, I had a discussion that I think because of this specific question I had as far as where I stood, I had a discussion on my channel with Philip Chase and Critical Dragon and Brittany from Books with Brittany. And the reason that I had those three on is that I saw Philip and AP as being very much of the approach of being very analytical and educational, trying to explain the information, as you will, and if you will. And then Brittany, on the other hand, is very vlog oriented, very much about the relatability of the story, like how we can relate to the story as humans, and she's just giving her raw feelings through the book. She's not trying to give you an analysis of the book. And I found her perspective extremely relatable, and I enjoyed it. I enjoyed that perspective. I enjoyed that kind of perspective on BookTube as much as someone who can talk in depth and give an in-depth analysis. I do love analysis, don't get me wrong. And I watch a lot of channels that do that. However, I think there's a place for all different types of perspectives.
Me too.
And I didn't want to, I think the reason that I also was grappling with that is because stuff. I love learning about narratology. I love learning about themes and exploring things in depth. And at the same time, I love being relatable, and I love talking about what this experience is like for various readers. So I don't know. I want to find that balance. That is actually my aim as a channel. And that's
Yeah.
something that I love. And I just love having that variety of experience on BookTube.
Yeah. So for me, that actually what you just said, that has been my lesson. It's been about balance and taking my time. When I started iWizard, I thought I'm going to be like Mike, because Mike was the first BookTube channel I got into. And I was like, he's really good at it, but I like the way he does everything. It's extremely accessible. I like how I feel when I'm watching his videos. I get really excited about the books. So I honestly started my channel thinking like I could be like a worse version of Mike, but it will still be fun to do. And I just like his model. And I realized I can't be like that. I can't be like, oh, be like Mike, the Michael Jordan thing. I can't pump out videos the same way that he can. I can't read as fast as he can. I realized I just have to go at my own pace. But I think another thing is just authenticity, whatever that means. I've come to understand that for me, reading the books that I want to read and making the kind of content I want to make, like, and saying in all cases what I believe to be true. And I know like you guys do that as well. When there's a book that you're just not feeling, you'll come right out and say it, even if it upsets half of the people who are your fans. That's more important to me than getting a ton of subscribers. And Mike's done that somehow, like be authentic. And he still has, 150,000 subscribers or something like that. So obviously I don't want to be talking to myself, but, and I do care deeply about my viewers and their feedback, and I want my audience to grow, but I would rather have a smaller, more niche audience and be true to myself, and rather than becoming this herd creature who seeks to be liked by everyone. And then I'm just hoping, what's the Field of Dreams quote? If you build it, they will come. I'm just hoping there are enough people that like what I'm doing. I don't know how you guys feel about that.
I said when I started, like, I wasn't going to lie to anybody, and I'm not going to pretend I like something I don't. I'm also not going to make content that I don't genuinely care about just because I know, it'll get a bigger audience. If I did that, I would tell you every Brandon Sanderson book I read is 11 out of 10, and I'd probably have 500,000 subscribers, honestly.
Yeah.
But like there is ways to do that. For me, I was like, I feel like your audience can tell if you're being disingenuous. They really can.
I knew that was true of you when you reviewed Name of the Wind, and I was like, oh.
Yeah, but see, also not being hot take guy, and just completely being like, you know what? I've never even actually read this book, but I'm going to make a video ranting about how terrible it is. I also don't want to do that kind of thing, because I was like, I don't know. I feel like a lot of people have made a really great living off YouTube. Like they quit your job money doing that. I just don't like being mean, so I don't think I really could do. Like I just did that. Pretty much a takedown of The Vanished Birds. And I was completely respectful about it. You love it, man. That's great. And I encourage you to read it yourself. Don't take my word for it. Always took that from Reading Rainbow. Don't take my word for it. Read it yourself. So I think that's about the best way you can do it without really upsetting people. But, it's going to happen. You're going to
That must have upset Johanna just a little bit, or disappointed. Johanna probably wanted you to like Vanished Birds
I
because
knew
I
you
think
wouldn't like it.
The thing is, the reason that people thought that I wouldn't like it is not why I didn't like it. It is like anti-capital. What? That's why you thought that I wouldn't like the book?
That's not why I didn't think you'd
No,
like
not
it.
you particularly. I got a
I
lot.
just honestly, I was like, that just doesn't feel like a Mike book. I can't put my finger on it. But
And I agreed to be in that group, being like that, saying, "Hey, it's going to be books that we wouldn't probably normally read on our own." So it was something that we went to, thought would be fun, But woof, man, that's all I'll say.
yeah. But I will say, like, I don't know. I think because I've been trying to understand, I don't know. I don't know what my deal is, but I feel like I've gotten, with some exceptions, I think I'm getting better at talking about books in such a sense that I can talk about a lot of good things a book's doing without liking a book.
Yeah.
And like an example of that is Jimenez's other book, the Spear Cuts Through Water. That was not a comfortable reading experience for me. I actually didn't have a good time reading that book, but I'll be darned, I could find a ton of things to say that were really well done about the book. I think it's a very well written book. I think it was ambitious. I think it was unique. I think it did a lot of things that I haven't seen done and in a modern style. Yet it just wasn't. It wasn't a book that spoke to me personally, and it
Yeah,
didn't
that's what I
feel
say.
comfortable
It
reading.
just wasn't for me. Is how I put it. And look at
Mhm.
my Name of the Wind. When I did actual standard review for Name of the Wind, I talked for just as long about the things I really liked as I did about the things I didn't like. I always find good things about a book I'm not enjoying. I can find some bad things about books I adore.
Yeah,
It happens. It
exactly.
doesn't mean you dislike it. I mean, who reads a book says that's a perfect book? There's absolutely zero things wrong with it. Who says that? At least I don't. I'm not the
Yeah.
5-star strumpet a lot of you guys are, though.
I don't know. I could be a 5-star strumpet sometimes, I guess.
well, Mike,
But I
that's
don't
kind
get
of how I
upset. Like,
feel about
no,
Stephen
Jordan,
King.
you apologized to me for not liking The Stand. I'm like, I want you to be honest with me. I'm not. I mean, does it suck a little? Sure, because I want everybody to have that same experience I had, but it doesn't bother me. I get the biggest apology I get on my channel all the time. I tried Dune. I just didn't like it. Sorry. Okay, great. No,
that one hurts a little bit. I have to admit.
No, when they make threads on my Discord just completely bashing Dune, that's when I'm like, all right, I got to go. But outside of that, no.
Well, it's nuanced too. Like again, as Johanna said, there's nuance to this. So when someone brings up Stephen King, my first thought is, I love Stephen King. I like the first half of every novel that he writes. I just don't like the way he ends his books. And a lot of people disagree with me about that and love the way he ends his books. I thought On Writing is one of the best memoirs that any writer has ever written about the writing life. So I've taught that at school. I've personally selected On Writing in my AP Lang class for the kids to read over the summer. I know how talented he is. And when you pick up a book like it, I like all the elements, Mike, that you like. And I love the coming of age. I love the rambling sort of 70s, 80s Huck Finn childhood that we all talk about. No one's better at writing that than he is. But I just don't like the way that I personally feel he writes himself into a corner and then has to like untie a knot that's impossible to untie. That's all. Like, aside from the like last, like, I wouldn't even say the last half, like the last third of every Stephen King book I've read. So far I've read On Writing. That one, in my opinion, is just fantastic. It, Under the Dome, and The Stand. I just didn't like the way they ended. That's pretty much it.
11/22/63. Sorry, had to get that out there.
I hear that and I want to read more Stephen King still. I find myself gravitated towards him somehow.
Yeah, when it's my Quilluminati pick, I've got to pick a Stephen King one just to get Philip to read more Stephen King. But yeah.
I just brought up 11/22/63 because I think the ending of that is
it's wonderful.
So good. Yeah.
I still have tear stains in the pages of my hardcover. Not even joking. Yeah, from the last couple of chapters of that book. Yeah,
I love that book so much. Yeah, it's amazing.
So why would I like it, Johanna? I think I would.
I don't know if you would.
Well, you might not. No? I actually think I like it more than some people I've talked to because I read that book and I think some of that had to do with timing. I know I did a video on timing and books that you really love, Jordan.
Yeah.
I think timing had a part to play in that with that book. Now I picked that book up because my oldest brother, I actually come from a family of King fans, And my oldest brother, that is his favorite book of all time. He has read it so many times. And so I wanted to read it because it's his favorite. But I picked it up actually during lockdown in 2020. And I think during that time, I was hearing so much conversation about the new normal or going back to normal. Everybody wanted things to go back to the way they were in the past. And reading that book just got me to think about growing pains as a country and growing and some of the certain events that we go through that, yes, I mean, there were certain things about the 50s that were great, but there were certain darker things about the 50s, dark things about the 50s as well. That's good that we left behind. And maybe we had to go through dark times to get to better times. I feel like that book in some ways explores that theme, but I also just am fascinated by the JFK assassination. So
Me
some
too.
of that might also have to do with timing when you grew up or obviously I wasn't alive when that happened, but I love talking to my mother, for example, who remembers exactly where she was the day that it happened. And every time I hear stories about it, it pulls me in, it gets to me. And so when I was reading the book, I remember waking up in the middle of the night thinking, I have to know what's going to happen. Like I'm going to go crazy. I need to know what's going to happen when we get to 11/22/63. And I feel like even though some people could argue, I know some people argue that the book is a little slow in places. I feel like every single
those
part of
books.
that book adds depth and richness to what happens at the end. I wouldn't take out any part of it.
Yeah, Jordan,
I
people are
thought,
like, "Oh, I don't like the slow part where it's just like them living their lives." You mean the slice of life stuff? That's my favorite part of the whole book.
Oh, me
But the
too.
thing
Oh my goodness.
the
I
thing
love that kind
was
of stuff.
is I was actually in my breakup period with Stephen King because I was so mad about Dark Tower. I had just been like, okay, maybe Stephen King is just like passing me by. I'm not really going to read him anymore. And it was like that for like a good 8 years. And I'm obsessed with the JFK assassination. The most nonfiction books I've read have been on the JFK assassinations. I know everything. I've been to Dallas numerous times. I've done all my own research on this stuff. Crazy about it. So when I heard he was doing a book on that, I was like, damn it, I gotta check it out. And then the book just like completely blew me away because it's a romance book on top of that. And it's a beautiful, beautiful romance book. And I'm like, how is he writing a book this long and this powerful at this age? And yeah, to me, that was what really kind of brought him back for me. So yeah, it's a special book, no
absolutely.
doubt.
And it's special too because you can tell it comes through in the story how much care King put into understanding that event, understanding the history. Obviously, he lived through it, but I mean, the attention to detail is there. So,
And
yes.
Jake
Oh
and
my.
Sadie are one of my favorite like fiction or couples ever. It's amazing. They're amazing. That's
Yes.
goals right there, man. Jake and Sadie.
Yes. And I also have a weakness for time travel because I grew up with Back to the Future on loop when I was a kid. So,
Yeah. Yeah. See, so here I said going into this, if Jordan asked me to recommend a book to him, I wasn't going to recommend a Stephen King book. Now it's going to be hard not to do this one.
yes. Read
It's
11,
true
22,
though. Like
63. Yes.
when I go to the bookstore, I'm still attracted to the Stephen King section. I still find myself being pulled like a magnet over to that section. And he's let me down a couple of times, but the high moments in every book that I've read of his have been high enough for me to be like, okay, this person just has the chops, has the talent, has that it factor that I don't think I'm going to stop experimenting with his books. So
It's powerful.
But you're
Yeah.
not alone. I mean, there's lots of King fans who don't like. So, I mean, I don't like every ending. I mean, I've been like Needful Things, 5-star book, 1-star ending. I've been like that in several of his books, you know. But to me, like you say, the pros vastly outweigh the cons where I can let some of those things go. But also, when you're a horror or thriller writer, I feel like, how do you please everybody? Because if you write a
Right.
happy ending, they call it bullshit. You write a sad ending, they say they need a little more pep in their life. You write an ambiguous ending, they say they need something, you know. So I feel like it's a triple-edged sword. You can't win.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
King is incredible. And I feel like I mean, there's so much King I still haven't read, honestly. Like I still haven't read it. I still haven't read The Stand, but
Girl, change your
yeah,
TBR. Read it.
I know.
Come
I
on.
know.
It's like we
I
don't even know
will.
each other.
The one thing that's been holding me back is my other brother. So I mentioned my brother whose favorite book is 11/22/63. My other brother, he loves The Stand. Like he told me he got to the end of The Stand. He said 1,000 pages. I could have handled it being 1,000 more. Like
Yeah.
that's how much I loved The Stand. But the book he gifted me was The Talisman. So I have that on my shelf, and I'm like, I need to read The Talisman because it's the one I own.
No
But there's so
comment.
much other King I want to read.
Wait, I feel like Mike has an interesting experience with the Talisman because I feel like, so I watched a review that he did of that book like he did it years ago, and I was like, oh, that sounds so interesting. And it's in some kid gifted it to me at the end of one school year, so I have it. And then I feel like Mike read it again. Am I wrong about that?
No, it was actually one of the ones that I had not. What I did is like I got into King in 1990, moved out here, and my high school library had like all of his books except Talisman and Dark Tower books. So I read everything he had written at that point. And so I didn't actually read Talisman until I was going through I was like, okay, I'm going to do this reread. Before I started a channel, I was like, I'm just going to do Stephen King reread publication order. I'm going to do everything. So I said, I'll do Talisman when I get to it. So that kind of happened for the first time on the channel. It didn't work for me, to put it that way.
Oh,
I mean, I think on paper, it has an amazing concept, but the execution just really, it's probably got one of the worst supporting characters in all of his books, which I just choose to blame on Peter Straub since that was a collaboration. So.
Oh no. Oh no. Yeah.
Yeah, and then there are like
love the Talisman, so maybe you'll enjoy it.
You've gotten me to read these big. So I've read Under the Dome. I read that before I even knew about your channel. And then the ones you got me to read personally were It and The Stand. So I've read his really chunky novels.
We're pushing 11/22/63 on you, which is just as beefy.
And I'm interested in that. And then my wife read Salem's Lot, and she absolutely adores that book.
Yeah, it's good.
And said, it's great. If you don't like his longer books, I really think, Jordan, you would like that because it's about vampires, and she loves vampires. And she said it actually is really well executed. And so maybe I would be more interested in his, his drug-fueled novels, like the ones he wrote originally where he was like totally high on cocaine. Yeah. But apparently they're really great.
Up until Tommyknocker.
Kids, don't do drugs.
Well, your wife is very smart. And I agree with her there. Like I watch a lot of the videos that she makes on her channel. She's very, very smart. And again, I'm pretty sure that she is the twinner to my wife on Another Path of the Beam. And if you read Dark Tower, you understand that reference. And the Talisman, you'll understand those references.
Well, that's one of our bonds, Mike, is that we both have to deal with feisty redheads.
It's a we're very patient men.
I love how, Mike, you've said before, you can't scare me. I'm married to a redhead.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, I liked Salem's Lot. I feel like there isn't the characters in it didn't quite stand out to me or stand off the page as much as some of other books I've read by King. But what I loved about Salem's Lot, in addition to the way he did vampires, was very good. I really love how he shows his strength in making the town a character. For me, the town, Salem's Lot, was as much a character as anything else in the story.
Same with Deepful Things, Under the Dome. It's just strength of his for sure. He can make you believe that community is real, and you don't have it. And even though there's dozens and dozens and dozens of characters, you'll have a problem keeping them separate because he makes them all so unique.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I saw, by the way, Mike, so you really loved his short story collection that he just released this last year. What did you think of this story? Because I actually read one story, but I didn't get to read it through the book. What did you think of On Slide-In Road?
I thought it was very strange. I was like, was the moral of that story, don't fuck with Vietnam vets? Because I don't really understand what he was trying to say there.
Well, I do, because I found out through another booktuber that he wrote that story as an homage to Flannery O'Connor. And so Flannery O'Connor wrote a short story called A Good Man is Hard to Find. And so I read that short story, and then I read King's On Slide-In Road. Now, I'll have to say this, O'Connor's story is superior, in my opinion, in every way. If you like stories that are very symbolic and have like a lot of subtext, at the same time, it's written in a very straightforward way, and it's dark. It is effing dark, that story, but much darker than King's, actually. It's much more messed up, but it made me appreciate what King did so much after I read that story. So like having the context was really cool for that.
I'll have to look it up then. Okay. Did not know that.
Yeah. You'll have a whole different perspective on it.
I go to everybody else's channels to actually learn things. Yeah, so that's what I do.
Highly recommend it. Yeah, because my mom is my mom actually has a degree in literature, so she can talk about analysis like just on the same level. I think as like AP and Philip, like she can. Well, maybe not as much as.
When are you having her on the channel?
PhD on that. I had her once for Piranesi a long time ago, but no, she's. I mean, I don't know. I might be talking her up too much. I might be biased because she's my mom, but she is brilliant. So she and I read that story, A Good Man is Hard to Find. I called her on the phone and we had an hour-long discussion, and she told me she unpacked so much of the symbolism that kind of went over my head when I read it. I really appreciated the story just on the first reading. But then when I talked about it to her, I'm like, whoa, this story is powerful. And then we both read King's story together. And I was afraid she wouldn't like King's story because it's very tongue in cheek.
Yeah.
And she loved it. She said, I love it. I love that he's doing something. He's doing his own thing, but that's fine. And it's great. And so we got a kick out of it. We actually both got a kick out of King's story. I know a lot of people feel kind of mid about that one, but if you read the Flannery O'Connor one, it brings so much context. It brings so much to understanding what King was going for.
Okay.
Now we know where Johanna got it. So the intelligence and the philosophical bent and the literary
so much
analysis.
Smarter than me. She is so much smarter than me, though. I will never be on the level my mom is when it comes to engaging with prose and story. But I love it. I nerd out. I could talk with her about books for hours and hours and hours. Yeah.
That's awesome. So, okay, have your reading tastes changed over time? And if so, how? I'll never forget, I had this English professor as an undergrad, and she was a great teacher, this wise older lady. And so we asked her one day in class, like, what do you read in your spare time? And she said, I used to be really ambitious. I would read these difficult classics, and I had this bucket list of books. But she said, for the past 5 years, I've just been in a different mode, a different, phase of life. And I've been rereading mystery stories and thrillers and detective novels. And she said, I just, I don't have time for that other stuff. I want to be wooed now at this stage of my life. I want to be entertained. So I wonder if you guys have found yourself craving different books, or if you've changed directions, or if you've changed your philosophy. I know I have, but I wanted to hear from you guys over time, especially since I've been watching your channels. I've been kind of watching these evolutions, but I wanted to get your take on how your reading tastes have changed, and what have you gone through any metamorphoses when it comes to just find yourself wanting to read?
You want to go, or you want me to go?
Go. You go first, because I have a lot to say about this. But
yeah, I think in the mid to late 90s, I wasn't even reading fantasy anymore. It was just Stephen King, Michael Crichton. I guess if you consider Anne Rice fantasy, I don't. I mean, it's vampires. So
George R.R. Martin, you were reading.
What's that?
You were reading George R.R. Martin, though, weren't you?
Nope, didn't happen until 2000. That's when I read the first one, was in the year 2000.
Oh,
and even then it was like, okay, well, all I had read really up to that point was Narnia and Lord of the Rings, So when I read Song of Ice and Fire, all of a sudden it was like eye-opening. But then it also did that thing where I hate it when people say the Malazan fans are the best at this. Not taking shots, Johanna, but Malazan fans are the fastest at saying, oh, it ruined all other fantasy for me, so I can't read anything else. I felt like when I read Song of Ice and Fire, and then I tried to read Wheel of Time and stuff like that, it was like, no, that's not what I'm looking for anymore. I need my fantasy to be more real and in your face. And I don't think it was really until I picked up First Law in the late 2000s where I was like, okay, see, this is more of what I was looking for. I want some stuff like that. But even then, I was still not really reading outside of I was just rereading Stephen King, and just that was really much it. But I was also only reading 4 or 5 books a year back then. It's kind of funny to think about. But it wasn't really till right before I started this channel where I was like, I'm gonna just see what happens and just start reading all kinds of different things. But even from then until now, yeah, I mean, I'm picking up new authors all the time, that I never thought I'd be picking up, just based off of recommendations. You can't run a channel and not get a boatload of recommendations, right? And you start to notice that people who are, when they pick one and they don't pick right, you're like, okay, well, I'll consider it. But, you kept right here like, well, last one they recommended was this. I don't know if I'm really going to go with that again, but then there are the people who consistently have picked ones that have really worked for you. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to take what they say to heart. And that's probably going to give me kind of an idea of where I'm leaning going forward, I think. Because I do think we all have those reviewers where we're like, I always say make up your own mind. But we do have those reviewers where like, we seem to usually share a brain on these things. So I'm going to trust that if they say I should read this, I'm going to probably go ahead and give it a try. Like, that's Petrick for me. I think that's Petrick for a lot of people, probably, right, at this point. So, yeah, I mean, to me, it's just always getting so many recommendations. Of course, it's going to keep evolving. And that's why I've done stuff like picked up manga that I would have never read 5 years ago. That's why I'm trying things like Shogun and Lonesome Dove, things that I never ever would have done. Those have become some of my favorite books ever, So yeah, I think it's one of those things where I have my comfort zone, obviously fantasy, sci-fi, horror, but picking up some new things every once in a while outside of your comfort zone, a little more historical fiction, westerns, things like that, has really been beneficial to me.
Johanna?
Oh yeah. I mean, I don't even know where to begin with this question. I feel like before I started a channel, I was reading various genres, and then when I started a channel, I didn't even intentionally mean my channel to become fantasy focused, but that just happened to be what I was reading. So I became very fantasy focused because that's most of what I wanted to read that year. And then I think what changed or what shifted me as far as my fantasy focus, and I still love fantasy, it's still my favorite genre. But I think I want to say that maybe picking up a couple of authors. One, John Williams with Stoner, which everyone knows. That was my favorite book a couple of years ago.
That's why I'm about to read John Williams from watching you sing his praises. That's
are y'all talking about the movie composer?
Not the Jurassic Park composer, no. But it is the book that officially made me a dude bro. So if you don't know, that's because there's a certain booktuber, Steve Donahue, who said only dude bros love Stoner. And I kept saying hello, and he ignored me. But
you've got some dude bro in you. I think you do.
Yeah, I guess I do. I guess I do, because I love a lot of dude bro books. I won't lie. And it's not, I don't know where that comes from.
To me, what is a dude bro book? Like, just so, I mean, I think I know, but let's narrow it down here.
Well, I mean, if you look at the fandoms, like for example, of Malazan, and if you look at the fandoms of, I'm trying to think of something else, like First Law. I mean, because there are a lot of us female fans of those series.
So it's just male oriented.
But I still feel like they're mostly male oriented, and I don't know if that's a misconception I have on my part. But even if you look at fantasy booktube, I mean, there's not a lot of us female epic fantasy booktubers. Like
the fact that you like my channel means that you're kind of a dude bro, because, and I look at these statistics with utter horror and dismay because I want more female fans, but my ratio is 92-8. And even my wife, just there's something about the way that we are that I'm trying to get more female fans. I don't know how to do it.
I'm like 86 to 88% male.
Well, YouTube skews male already, but
yeah, the majority of my audience is male. Yeah. And it's weird because like if you look at, YA fantasy booktube, it's predominantly female.
It's just, that's true.
It's a thing. And I found out I love McCarthy, and McCarthy is for sure dude bro territory 100%. But I feel like that also with those two authors, John Williams and McCarthy, for whatever reason, they just evoked so much wonder in me, so much intrigue. And I also appreciated reading McCarthy when I did, because I read No Country for Old Men many years ago. Actually, that's my least favorite McCarthy, to be honest, but probably a good starting point.
Worse than Blood Meridian? Oh, okay.
So what was that?
Worse than Blood Meridian?
Well, I loved Blood Meridian. I know that's crazy, but I read that alongside.
I'm the crazy one.
I think part of what I loved, what made me helped me love Blood Meridian is, one, I read like 10 pages a day max, which helped me to absorb it because it is dense. And two, I read it at the same time as I was reading Bakker's not the darkness that comes before.
So you were already down the muck, and you said, "Give me some
two heaps of punishment for you."
Yeah, I was. I mean,
you were already in tortured mode. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, that third book though in the trilogy, The Thousandfold Thought, opens with the Blood Meridian quote, and I think getting to know McCarthy's books, it helped me to see the influence, because it was very influential on Bakker, obviously. Also influential on Joe Abercrombie. Like when you read, I know the one that everybody doesn't like, but Red Country, big Blood Meridian influence in that book.
Yeah, he told me that when I interviewed him, and basically told me I was wrong. So
did he really?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that. I got to watch that interview. Yeah. So I think it's really fun to see influences from other genres or other authors and how they correspond to another. So I guess that's kind of set me down a rabbit hole of just exploring other types of books and finding other kinds of gems or hidden gems and other genres. So I don't know. I've been really drawn towards other genres lately. For whatever reason, it's not very good for my channel, I'll be honest, because I feel like YouTube usually likes to reward you staying in your lane, like sticking to one
Yeah.
genre. And
Yeah.
if you
Oh, yeah.
branch out a little bit here and there, YouTube is cool
Yeah.
with that. But
Yeah.
if you start branching out a lot, as I've been, it's like your audience is like, who are you? What are you doing?
Try to review a classic. Let me know how that goes.
Oh, I know. Yeah. Yeah.
I was gonna do Call of the Wild one time. I was like, nah, I don't want a video with like 400 views.
Yeah. And I get that. I mean, I think so. I was watching a channel recently in a different part of BookTube in YA fantasy BookTube. And the creator, it was Elliot Brooks. I don't know if y'all know who Elliot Brooks is, but
Yeah.
she did a video and she talked about this. And she wasn't doing so in a complaining way, but she was talking about how, like, if you looked at her, she showed her views for certain videos, like new fantasy releases and this type of fantasy. And then she did a video on her main channel because she has a media channel, a different channel. But on her main channel, she did read this if you like Avatar: The Next Airbender. And she said she did that on her main channel because she figured enough fantasy fans like Avatar: The Next Airbender. That did not do well on her main channel. And then she showed her videos after that video, and they all went like 10,000 less views after she did one video that was outside her lane, that was outside what she does.
That's why
And
it's like I
YouTube
say, you
punished
make
her.
the videos that you want, and I say, you know, hey, try to take risks and stuff. But yeah, it can screw you pretty bad. Really
Yeah.
can.
And I know she does it for a living. Like that's her job. So I kind of felt for her, but yeah, it's hard. I think as far as that's concerned, being a content creator.
Yeah, that's too bad. I've seen the exact same thing. And my attitude, and this is probably why I have 2,500 subscribers, or at least that's a part of it, is that when I see that trend, it makes me want to lean in even harder. Like, screw that stupid algorithm. Like I can't believe that the promotion of my videos depends on like, ooh, I'm branching out and I'm trying this new thing. You know, I just I don't like that. But let me ask you, as a booktuber, just related to what you guys were just talking about, do you ever feel pressure to read certain books that are more popular, or do you just follow your internal compass? So, like, what's that equation like for you in terms of making sure that your content appeals to the widest possible audience, and also reading exactly what you want to read just for pure personal enjoyment, knowing that, like, what was the famous Harold Bloom quote? "He who reads must choose." Right? Your life is finite, and life is kind of short, and you can't just read everything. Mike can't be reading every single damned book that every indie booktuber ever sends him. He has to like draw a line, and and I think he does do that well. But like, do you find that, like, being a booktuber, like, in some ways dictates what your reading life looks like?
In some ways, yes. I think it more it's just like I don't want to sell my viewers a path that I say I'm going to do and then don't do it. So I will say, hey, I had planned to do this, and then just be like, you know what, screw it, I'm just going to do what I want. Y'all have fun, because I know a lot of people do like to read the same thing that I'm reading, and I don't want them to go out and buy a book that I say I'm going to read and then I don't read it. So yes, with that. But as far as like, oh well, I feel like I need to make this video or I need to read this book, the only time that really happens for me is when all the people I talk to on BookTube are all coalescing around one book. I'm like, well, shit, I got FOMO now. I got to find out what this is about.
Yeah.
That's why, like, everyone was talking about the Ryan Cahill books. Like, all right, I got to check this out. I got to. Patrick won't leave me alone about it. And okay, why not? I'll go ahead and give it a try. I wanted to try some self-pub anyway. It's one of my favorite fantasy series now, without a doubt. So it works out sometimes, and sometimes it don't. But I think with me, it's not, I really don't care about what book's popular right now and stuff like that. Because honestly, like the books that are popular on Reddit, they almost are always a miss for me. So I've kind of leaned away from that. But if Philip and Johanna and Matt and everybody I know, Brian, are all reading like the same book and they're just carrying on about it, it makes me want to just say, yeah, I'm gonna do that. More so than, hey, this book's really popular at Barnes and Noble right now.
Yeah. Yeah, I have a very similar answer to that. I get FOMO just like anybody else, and when I hear people gush and gush about a book, it definitely motivates me. I I sometimes get a little overwhelmed because I'm a very slow reader and there are just too many books and too little time. But then sometimes when I get on the fence of like, I don't know, I just don't know if I can fit this in. Like for example, in my last video, Mike's gonna be happy about this, I think. But a book that's been on my TBR for this year, one my main book on the TBR for this year, the big book on the TBR for this year is Lonesome Dove. And when I talked about it in my last TBR video that I released a couple of days ago, I did say I'm a little nervous because I already have all these other books I'm committed to. But what helped me get excited again is that all the comments where people are like, don't worry, I know it's big, but I promise you it reads fast and you're going to love it. And then just seeing how many people got so passionate about it. And then, of course, knowing friends here like Mike is so passionate about Lonesome Dove.
I love
And
Lonesome Dove, by the way.
Oh, you do
I
too?
don't
And
like
you're gonna love it
westerns,
too.
and that book is incredible. I'm not even worried about you liking it. It's amazing, and
Yeah.
yeah, it's one of those. It's like I can't believe that book's that long. I can't believe how fast I went through it. It's just that good. Yeah. It's
Yeah.
amazing.
So, I mean, that's a popular book, by the way. I mean, it came out, how long ago did it come out? How many decades did it come out ago? It still has
3 or 4.
huge wait lists on everyone's library that I've talked to. Somehow my hold for my library just came in. But if you look on the electronic, like the ebook version I was trying to get, several month wait. It's crazy. And I mean, that's amazing. That's
Someone
just,
was talking about that and asking me if it was like that before I talked about it. I was like, I know you guys think I got a lot of influence, but I don't have that much influence. This book has been popular for generations. Calm down. I didn't discover Lonesome Dove. Don't worry about it. But I think, when someone like me does take a step out and say, I'm going to try something like that and then gushes about it, it probably does get a lot of people who are like, well, I didn't think that I would like something like that. So I'll give it a shot, and 100% success rate. I can't think of anyone that picked up Lonesome Dove after I talked about it that said they were disappointed with it. So
yeah. I already know I'm going to love it because I watched a lot of the miniseries when I was a kid.
yeah.
And I still remember it. Like I must have been 9 years old at the time, and I can still remember Gus, and I remember what happened to Gus.
Yeah.
So
I watched the miniseries first and thought, oh, that might actually like diminish a little bit. Not even close. It
yeah,
was one of those things more, or I was like bargaining with myself. Maybe it'll be different in the book, But yeah, the thing is like I did my top 10 authors of all time, and I was like, honestly, I've read 2 Larry McMurtry books, and he almost made it. That's how much I've loved those 2 books of his that I've read. So
yeah,
I can't read the next one. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I still haven't watched that yet, but I'm excited to. It's definitely on. It's one of the next ones I'm gonna watch, Mike.
That's all Philip. I had said that was a video I was never going to make, and he kind of bullied me into it, and in a Philip kind of way, basically like being really
If
positive.
anyone
and
can
telling
get you to make a
do
video,
it,
it's Philip.
he really has faith in you, that type. The Philip bullying, being super positive towards you.
Yeah. Yeah. So speaking of, what are you guys reading right now? What do you have on deck for this summer? And that sort of thing. Like what's moving you right now?
What is that book? Tell us about that because I don't know anything about.
Ronald Malfi is an author that King fans have been in my comments about for a couple of years now. Like I'll go to all my Stephen King videos and see something like, when I talked about Bag of Bones, just about everyone was like, you got to read Come With Me. It's the better version of Bag of Bones.
Oh, it's horror, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I believe so. I mean, so far I'm only 60 pages in. It's like a mystery right now, but I'm interested. I'm definitely interested. I'm liking where it's going, but that's just me where I said I wanted to do more horror that isn't just in October, because I do love the genre. And the thing was, like, I was like, but I'm only reading like 2 or 3 authors. I want to kind of branch out a little bit, So I talked to Rachel over at Shades of Orange, talked to Jason's Weird Reads, talked to Jaime Fuego at the Horror Channel. Just been trying to get more ideas for some horror authors that I might like. Jaime's a big Stephen King guy like me, so I know he's not going to recommend me trash. But the thing is like with something like this, you get that certain set of expectations. If someone says, "Oh, it's like Steve," is it like Stephen King, or will Stephen King fans like it? That's the thing. Because if you tell it's like Stephen King, you're going in with a different set of expectations. So I would say, like with Nick Cutter, I tell people Stephen King fans would like it. If you go into it thinking you're going to get a Stephen King book, you're going to be upset. I think the closest I could do with that would be Robert McCammon and say that those people seem to be satisfied with that. But no, I wouldn't say that that's a good way to do it. But yeah, just trying to get more than just fantasy. I've been doing this thing where I've I got burned out on really long books, and I was like, I need to take a break. Like for fantasy fans, 500 pages or less is not a long book. You know, you can tell we're epic fantasy fans when that's the ruling there. But I want to try to do a horror, sci-fi, and a fantasy and like a miscellaneous every month. And I've been doing that for a couple months now, and I'm really enjoying it. It's keeping things really fresh.
That's cool.
Anything else, Mike?
I just finished that first book in the Demon Wars by R.A. Salvatore. It's fine. It's fine. I'll talk about it here on if I get around to making my weekly video today. I'm supposed to, But I think what I'm doing Silo. I'm going to be reading Silo here pretty soon. I started reading that book a while back, and it just wasn't the right time for me. You guys do that? Like, you'll be like, I'm interested, but it's just not the right timing right now, and you'll stop.
Totally.
It's not like a DNF thing. It's like, I'll come back to it later. So I'm just going to start over because I did like the Apple TV series, and I felt like it was pretty faithful from my memory of what I had read of it. But really, just kind of keeping it open. This is the first time since I've had this channel that I don't have my TBR planned through the end of the year. I'm just going a month at a time. It's terrifying. Don't get me wrong, but it's been kind of freeing, that I was able to pick up like that Silver Blood Promise out of nowhere. I was able to join this book group with Brian and John and Philip. So it's been interesting. I won't pretend it isn't scary for someone like me that likes to be always prepared, but it's a little liberating in many regards.
So quick question on that before we'll go to Johanna next on what she's reading right now. On R.A. Salvatore, I remember I was one of the original guys trying to get you to read Dark Elf Trilogy, and I was selling it. I read just the original trilogy, and I've never read anything else by R.A. Salvatore, not even the I don't forget what it is, Vector Prime or whatever, the Star Wars. But you really have been diving into R.A. Salvatore. What should I read next for him? Because my wife says it's Icewind Dale. Yeah. Which I guess takes place before the Dark Elf trilogy, but like
Dark Elf is a prequel. So Icewind Dale came
is
first,
it?
And Dark Elf was a prequel about how Driss got to work with Guinevere. Reading it that way, which is the way that I read it, you're gonna love Icewind Dale. It's gonna be great.
Okay.
Icewind Dale.
So that's what I should do next. And have you ever read any of the other extended like Driss books?
Yeah, I started Legacy of Drow. Only got one book in, but I'm going to go back to it I've read 7 Driss books and I've enjoyed all of them. So yeah, no doubt it's going to be my like long thing. Like whenever I just have like, hey, I got like a few days before the month rolls there, because we're stupid like that. We're like, oh, I can't start the new month reads yet. I can fit something else in between then and now. But Driss book you can read in a couple of days. They're really fun. But I've loved all of them so far.
That's like great beach read, like airport read books, like palate cleanser.
It doesn't even have to be quiet around the house. Kids could be loud. You could be out in a public place.
That's right.
And have a good time.
I had such a great time with that series. I didn't like Sojourn that much. Or what was the third one? It was Homeland.
I was with you the same way there. It felt like you were kind of trying to get everything lined up since it was prequel. Yeah, Icewind Dale is legit, man. I loved all 3 of them.
Oh, okay. Oh, that's what I'll do next of his then. Johanna, what are you up to?
Oh, well, I'm okay. So I'm actually.
She is still reading long books, I think.
I'm still reading what?
Long books.
Yeah.
Take a break from long books.
Yeah. I started Janny Wirtz's Peril's Gate, which is book 6 in the Wars of Light and Shadow.
That's the FOMO series, but that's what I'm talking about. All you guys doing Janny Wirtz. Janny Wirtz sending me all those books. I'm like,
did she send them to you?
Yeah, when I finished Realm of the Elderlings, she messaged me and was like, "Hey, I noticed you just finished Realm of the Elderlings. You've got room in your schedule for you actually. I just want to shoot my shot. Basically, is what she said. No pressure, but hey, I would like to send these to you, and if you get to them, cool. If not, no big deal. But super nice lady.
She is a sweetheart.
Honestly, that's the kind of stuff that influences me to read people's books is when they're super nice to you, not because they send it to you, but when they're just super nice to you. And she was super nice to me.
She is very nice.
I didn't mean to insult you. It cut you off there. I just meant that
it's fine.
That's an example of the FOMO I'm talking about when everyone I know is starting to read a series.
Yeah, and I know you've heard Philip gush about it, right? I mean, Philip keeps talking about how she's going to be one of the best in literature. The series will go down as one of the best in literature. Now, her style is very dense. It takes a long time to read her books for me. She is a wordsmith. She has incredible diction. Like she picks words that I've never heard before. I have to use my dictionary for quite a few times. But every time I look up the word, I'm amazed how perfect her word fits to what she's describing. So she's a very rich, very descriptive writer, very immersive. So I don't, I just have to put that out there. It can take some time to get into her stuff as a result of her richness of prose and style. But I am enjoying that series quite a bit. And so I am just started book 6, as I said, and it will take me a long time to read that book because those books, like I said, they're dense as far as the style is concerned. And then I started Bakker, Aspect Emperor book. So it's book 2 in the Aspect Emperor series, which is a 4-book series following the Prince of Nothing trilogy. I cannot wait for you to read that, Mike. I think you're going to have a good time with Bakker. I know you're waiting till you're finished with Malazan.
But I'm starting to wonder if that's ever going to happen. I mean, it's been 2+ years now.
That's a good question. Do you think it's going to happen?
I don't know. I kept saying I was going to wait like till the calling, and I just not having it. I don't know. It sucks because, oh my God, you're 70+% through this amazing series and you're really going to stop. It's just, you just have to be so mentally prepared for something like Malazan. I just don't feel like I am right now. I don't know.
So, what I'll tell you is that I have a spoiler-free discussion on my channel of Malazan with some friends, and I know Alan, Library of Alexandria, and Brittany from Books with Brittany, when I talked to them after we all finished the series, they weren't as high on the last 3 books in this series. So there are actually a lot of people in the fandom who just aren't as crazy about those last books. So I just want to put that out there. If you don't connect to them or you find that the style does change quite a bit in those last 3 books. So if it doesn't speak to you, I think that's totally understandable.
I've started Toll the Hounds twice and stopped almost in the same spot. So doesn't bode well. But again, I still am I'm not putting it on my series I won't finish list or anything. But I also don't feel this rush that I have to do it, now or a year from now. Like I get a lot of people like shit or get off the pot, and I'm like, you're not my dad. I can do what I want. I can take as long as I want in the metaphorical bathroom, But
yeah, I think it's fine to take your time too. I think a big mistake I know for me, I took forever after book 2 to continue the series, and I was convinced I had to start all the way over because so much happened. And I remember at the time Philip said, "No, you'll be fine. Just keep going." And I'm so glad I took that advice. I'm so glad I didn't start over.
I was talking to Philip recently and saying, like, I don't know. I feel like I've taken so long away now. I don't know if I'll understand anything. And he's like, it's not that kind of series. And you know that. That's true. That's true.
You won't understand what he
means. Understand anyway.
Yeah. You won't understand what he means until you finish. And then it'll make perfect sense why that's the case. I can't say anything more than that. I thought it was worth it though. I've never had a feeling like I felt when I finished The Crippled God. I've never experienced anything like that with any book I've ever read ever. So for me, it was so worth it. It was incredible. But I can also understand why, especially those last 3 books, wouldn't click for everyone.
Scale just burned me out, man.
That book, I had a very mixed experience with it. I'm sorry, Jordan. I've pivoted to talking about Malazan.
No, it's okay because Malazan, is it Malazan? It's Malazan, isn't it? Okay.
You want to say
so more of my alienation from you guys. So I want to be again, I know we talked about this before, but I do want to be someone who likes Malazan. And I read Gardens of the Moon, and I am not someone who likes Malazan. And it's interesting because Mike will say to me, I've been trying to get Mike to read Alistair Reynolds for, I think, 5 years now, or 4 years now. And he hasn't done it yet, but I hope one day he will realize I have been the gold standard subscriber of his channel and his friend for a very long time. And one day he will deign to stoop low enough to take my suggestion on what to read. And one day he'll read those. But I wanted to say to Mike that Alistair Reynolds is not dense in the way that Stephen Erickson is dense. When I read Gardens of the Moon, half the time I had no idea what was going on, which is not the case with Alistair Reynolds. You have to read it slowly, kind of like you said with Janie Wirtz, but you always know completely and totally what's going on. It's not.
That's been a problem with a lot of popular science fiction. Is this actually happening? Is this a dream?
No, not with Alistair Reynolds.
Is this
Take it slow, focus,
you never know.
Read it slowly, and you will understand everything that's going on. And for me, and I think this reflects my own neuroses and my own pathologies is that I read Steven Erikson, and I have a very Western linear mind. And when I tried to read Steven Erikson, I was uncomfortable with the fact that I wasn't getting everything. And so I would linger over pages for hours and, or chapters for hours. And I just was uncomfortable with the fact that then I would pick it up the next morning and forget what I had read. And like, maybe I have some sort of like, mental slowness, or there's just something wrong with me. But I did try. I read the first book, and then I have a lot of like friends who say like, no, you just got to like go for the ride. Like, like plug into the Audible and like listen to it at like speed 2. And I'm like, no, I'm not going to do that. Like, I want to know what's going on. And I couldn't figure out what was going on. I don't want to be one of those people that like sits down like some maester and like is like reading the like Malazan wiki page or whatever. Like, this is who this is. I shouldn't need that to get into.
I don't do that. I didn't do
enjoy
that.
a book. So like maybe Johanna, you could tell me like what is wrong with me.
Nothing's wrong with you. I by the way, I did not do that. Every once in a long while, I might have checked the wiki to double check. Was I introduced to this character before? Because I don't remember everyone all the time when I read that series. And I have to say also, I mean, just caveat here, I'm not, this is going to sound kind of hypocritical in some ways, but I am not, in the sense that like there are some books that are exceptions to what I'm about to say. But I don't feel like I consider myself much of a plot-driven reader, meaning I don't feel like I need to know where this is going and I have to understand what, I don't know. I'm just not the most plot-driven reader. That's the best I could say. And there are aspects of the Malazan plot that even when I finished book 10, I don't know that I understood everything. But I think what helped me was just thinking of it more in terms of themes and epic moments. So like I loved the battle scenes, for example, as far as like what I mean by epic moments.
I did too. That was a great part of that, made it feel like it was worth it.
Yeah. And I loved, as far as themes, so this is very important when it comes to Erikson. The way that I approached understanding themes in the story, a good way to understand theme when you're reading a story, as you know, is to understand the character conflicts. So I would just kind of try to understand what are the characters experiencing? What are their conflicts? I do feel like that might be a little more challenging in Gardens of the Moon, the way it's structured, the way it's written. But I think you'll start to notice that become more clear. Have you read on to the second book, Dead House Gates?
No, I never did. And to your point, Britton, no, I am not really. I think you're trolling me, Britton. No, like decidedly, I am not into postmodernism at all.
It is a postmodernism book. That's why he's serious.
No, I am not into that. It's not my thing. The idea that it is true that there is no such thing as truth is just not my thing. I am committed to a bunch of other set of like axioms, fundamental axioms that guide my worldview, but postmodernism is like not one of them. The closest I get to that is existentialism. But to your point, Johanna, he is so talented. He's clearly brilliant, Steven Erikson. There were some scenes that I will never forget. They're burned into my brain from Gardens of the Moon. And again, I think it might be my problem. Again,
no, I'm so sick of unreliable narrator that I hear postmodernism. I'm like out.
Yeah.
I don't mind fragmented, non-linear, like especially like you're going to read a war novel, you read Slaughterhouse-Five. It is much more something like Slaughterhouse-Five is written in this postmodern fashion. And because it's written that way, it seems like it feels like it more accurately conveys the realities of war. Something like The Things They Carried, which is a series of vignettes that is written in this there's story truth versus literal truth versus objective truth and all of this. I can get into that. And I've read, I was a philosophy major. I have a bachelor's in English as well. I have a master's degree. I've read some really hard books. James Joyce. I've read some hard books. It didn't work for me. Steven Erikson. But again, I want to be one of those smart people that's in the Johanna and Jimmy and Philip and AP club. I want to sit at the cool kids table, but I just can't lie and say that I enjoyed the experience of reading Gardens of the Moon. Help me, Johanna.
Well, all I'll say is that not everybody needs to be a Malazan lover. I
That's
think
it,
it's
man. You can't
totally
force it.
fine.
Yeah.
Like, if you don't like it, it's perfectly fine. Like, there is so much other fantasy out there to love,
I
honestly.
tell people about Dune, man. Not everybody's gonna love
Yeah.
it, you know.
Not everyone's gonna love Dune, yes, and I love Dune. But the thing is, when it comes to Malazan, what I would say is that Gardens of the Moon, I feel like the most unpopular book in the series, possibly. Most people don't really care about that book as much as other books in the series. Now, I oddly loved it, but again, I didn't really feel like, and I did take my time, and I did understand more than I think I understood a lot of it, surprisingly, on my first read of it, but I
Right.
didn't. There was probably a lot I didn't understand, and I was okay with that. Like, I was okay. I'm okay not feeling like I understand everything. So I think that you have to have some amount of like being able to set that aside. But what I would also say is that for people who are getting into Malazan and don't like Gardens of the Moon, I always say maybe if you want to, maybe try Dead House Gates.
I
And
am
if you
willing to do that.
and if
So,
you don't like
yes.
Dead House Gates, give up. Like,
Okay.
there's no reason to continue to Memories of Ice. If you're like,
Will
I
do.
don't like this is worse or not as good or same. But if you like Dead House Gates, then go on. That's what I would
Okay.
say. Because Dead House Gates is so drastically different than Gardens of the Moon. You're on a different continent. You have several different characters. The pacing is way slower, in my opinion. I actually liked Gardens of the Moon more personally. I'm odd that way, but at the same time, the ending is, well. Anyway, just try Dead House Gates. Most people tend to love that book. But again, if you don't like Dead House Gates, give up. I don't think it's worth your time. Like, there are so many
Okay.
other good series out there to try.
Will do. So I'm realizing that I am both OCD and neurotic, so that's going to be an extreme problem. I am an Ashkenazi Jew. I'm like extremely neurotic, and it's just part of like who I am and my family. And I'm not comfortable not knowing what's going on. So when my wife was getting her PhD at Cornell, I am not as smart as her, so I did not apply to Cornell. But I did work there at the plant breeding and genetics lab. She got me a job, and I worked there. And there was this guy in the lab who was like a total like Malazan, zealot. And he was just obsessed with it. And part of what he liked about it was not knowing what was going on, was how crazy. It's kind of like people who like Malcolm Lowry or Thomas Pynchon or any of these sort of modernist, postmodern writers. But I am willing to like continue on and read Dead House Gates because I want to be part of the cool kids club. And I also understand how talented he is. And to your point, Sam, hi, Sam. I didn't feel that same uncomfortability with Book of the New Sun because I had Christopher as my little like helper guiding me through it.
Wow.
So he was like teaching me about it as I was reading it. I also bought that that chapter guide that kind of unpacks the whole book. And so I was studying it again like a monk. And also the Book of the New Sun is one of those books that you can appreciate on like 3 different levels. You can be like a sophomore in high school and read it, and it's like a really fun like science fantasy story. And you can get through the book and not really know what's going on in the whole dying earth sort of symbolism sense and all of the like sort of biblical allegory. You can know what's going on with that. You can not know what's going on with that and still enjoy the book. And then there's like a deeper level. And then there's like the level that Christopher understands it on. I think I hit the middle level there. So for me, I think I was really connecting to the philosophy and to the themes. And Christopher and I have a very similar worldview. And Gene Wolfe has a very similar worldview to Christopher and myself. And I think it just clicked in a way that's very hard to describe, in a way that Malazan didn't.
I'm going to try it someday. I'm going to try Book of the New Sun someday. But
totally
all
worth
of this
it.
to say, though, I was going to get to come around to saying to Mike that I think you would like Bakker, though, because Bakker or you wouldn't find Bakker as challenging because
Well, I
it is
read the
much
first
more,
book and
yeah,
absolutely positively loved it to death.
it's much more linear, and you're following a smaller group of characters.
Yes.
But it is epic in scale, and you will
Yes.
see the Dune influence, and I just think you should give it a
It's
shot.
on my TBR. I reviewed the first
method
book.
that I have where I'm just like reading whatever. I might just do it one day just out of the blue. So you never know.
The darkness that comes before. Yeah, it's brutal. It is by far the darkest series I've
A
ever
lot of
read.
Dune fans have recommended to me, and that's had me really. It's really been pulling on me. Big
Mike,
time.
you would love it.
The Judging Eye, which I just read, which is Aspect Emperor Book 1, I feel like I could see Children of Dune influence in that book as well. It's so good.
Y'all using cheat codes. This is like Patrick always telling me, "Oh, you'll love this. It's like the first law," because he knows I'll read it.
Yeah, it's so good. Lord of the Rings too. Big Lord of the Rings influence, especially in the Judging Eye. But in a
People always
really
ask me,
dark,
Mike,
morbid.
have you ever considered writing something like, no, it would just be a ripoff of Dune and Lord of the Rings. Sounds like somebody beat me to the punch, huh? All right. Dune of the Rings? All right.
It's so good. I only know the first book and I was blown away. I could not. I remember making a video about the first book in Prince of Nothing, Darkness That Comes Before. And it's one of those books that is so in my wheelhouse because I majored in philosophy and Bakker's a philosophy guy. And I've read everything that Nietzsche's ever written. And Bakker knows a lot about Nietzsche and has embedded those themes in his story. And so it was one of those books that was hard to read only in one sense, that I kept stopping every 3 or 4 pages and needing to like write a discourse about what I was experiencing. And I just connected so well with Bakker. So I have that on my TBR. I have the next 2 books, and one day I'll catch up with Johanna. But that's one of the reasons I love your channel, Johanna, is you read books like that. And I know like Bakker's very male coded, but you know, I like what I like. Okay. And I think it's cool that you've gotten into that as well. And so has Philip. And so, and Jimmy and others, but there's a comment here about Daniel Abram. I have no experience. My wife has read all of the James S.A. Corey books.
Yeah, same here.
And I love George R. R. Martin, but I wanted to ask you guys. I think Johanna once told me that I would really like what was it? Long Price Quartet.
Yeah,
and
I love that.
Johanna, tell me about that.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel kind of bad though, because I know I recommended that to Brittany from Books with Brittany, and she just recently DNF'd the first book, hated it, and so I'm like, okay, well, maybe I don't know what I'm talking about. But what I loved about it is it's a Japanese-inspired fantasy story, and it's more of a contained story, though. I mean, I know that it has epic elements, but I would say it's a little more high fantasy in the sense that it really zooms in on the friendship of these 2 characters that you meet in the prologue, and you follow their journey over the course of decades. So you're following a friendship and you're following the journey in this world over the course of decades. So every story in the quartet is set so many years apart. And I fell in love with the character work. I fell in love with the world building, the way that Abraham, he does certain little details that make you think of Japan. So like bathhouses, people going and having tea in bathhouses or wearing silk robes. And there's really interesting magic in that story too. So yeah, I really love that particular quartet. I think it's a beautifully written story. It's one of those stories where I personally like the first story the most for whatever reason, but each story adds richness to the whole. It's one of those stories that feels like you get to the end and it's all just one complete beautiful journey that really zooms in again on a friendship. So
well said.
Yeah,
Mike,
beautiful.
have you read?
I've read all The Expanse, and I'm going to be reading the new James S.A. Corey series here in August. But I have Dagger and the Coin, and I have Long Price Quartet, but I haven't actually picked either of them up yet, even though when all you guys were doing your herd mentality over Long Price Quartet, I was very, very tempted to, but I did not.
I was very late to the game. I was very, very late to the game because Alan was the Long Price Prophet, and it sold out. It sold out at bookstores for a long time, but I got my hands on a copy and finally read it. So yeah, I really loved it. And I think that Abraham has a talent for writing not only young characters, like coming of age, you do have a beautiful coming of age story, especially in the first book, but also writing old characters, and not just old male characters, but old female characters, and showing how those characters can still consider each other attractive or still feel things, still have challenges, still grow. So I just love the depth of characterization across ages throughout that quartet as well.
Hmm.
But
Yeah.
also, I never even finished what I was reading. I'm also finishing Philip's book this month, The Return to Edan. And I'm also reading The Paper Menagerie by Ken Liu. So I'm reading a ton of books right now. Sorry, I just thought I'd go ahead and answer that question finally.
No, good. Thank you. I totally I forgot that was what we were supposed to be talking about.
I know. I forgot too.
I just get into it. Yeah, you guys are very engaging. Yeah, I've been trying desperately to stick to a TBR. I've never been good at that. I am a total mood reader. Up until now, that's the way I've just approached reading, is just mood reading. I always assumed that's how it works. But I am trying to grow as a person. Like I've never understood how like Mike sticks to this, how he makes like this long TBR, and then if I remember right, he makes like a spreadsheet. Like he just has everything and then he follows through.
No. If you guys could see it at the beginning of the year and see what I actually read off of, you'd see it's a little scattered. But when it comes to like, okay, I've got these long series, I want to finish them. I will force myself to stick to a schedule for stuff like that. But that's why this year I just said I have to force myself to finish The Expanse and Realm of the Elderlings last year, which I enjoyed both. But I said I do feel like it tied me down a lot and it took away a lot of my freedom. I said this year I'm doing one per month and I'm only committing to book one in a series. I'm not going to be like, okay, I pick up this new series. I'm going to do it January, February, March. Like, I'm not doing that anymore because people would buy the whole set and I'd read book one and bounce, and then they'd be quite upset with me, So
yeah,
it's going to take it down just a little bit.
Yeah, that's true about you, probably just from following your channel so closely, but you're better than me. When it comes to TBRs and sticking to them, I don't know, you're able to delay gratification or just be more disciplined.
Yes, but you read smarter books than me. That's why I haven't read Alistair Reynolds yet. I'm not
No, it's that I teach so many classes at school. I teach, right now, like I just finished school, Friday, so I have the next 9 weeks off, which is like wonderful. But
very good teacher.
I for the last 2 months was teaching 6 classes a day, 5 days a week, and they're all and like it's 4 different preps, meaning like it's 4 different classes with like all different books, and it's a lot to keep in my head, and so I find that I don't have enough bandwidth to read the same amount that and Alan's smarter than I am, so he can like teach that many classes probably and just like do what I can't do. But I recently did make a TBR video, and my rule is I have to stick with this list. I can change the order, I can add some books in here or there, but the TBR is like my roadmap because I have goals and I don't want to be just a slave to my whims all the time. So the first book that I did follow through and read on that list was Disquiet Gods, book 6 of the Sun Eater series. I know, Mike, you'll eventually get to that this summer, which is...
I'm just taking my break from long books, and cool.
I get that. Yeah, you'll get to it when you get to it, and I think you'll enjoy it mostly. I think it'll be like of all the Sun Eater books that have been written, it might be like your 4th favorite, maybe. I think you'll enjoy it. So I finished that. I really like that. I am now reading Philip Chase's The Way of Edan.
The only one
I'm very much enjoying that so far. It's been really fun getting a peek into the professor's mind. And he's coming on next Thursday to talk about that and to talk about like publishing and indie publishing. I just finished reading Michael Crichton's Sphere, Mike. Oh, wow. And that choice was actually inspired by you, and you probably didn't even realize it. I told you, Mike, on your Discord that I'd read Jurassic Park books 1 and 2, and I also read Sphere. And then I posted a poll giving 5 choices, asking what I should read next. And in the Discord, I don't know if you remember, your patron Discord, you were like, "Have you read Sphere?" And I was like, "Yeah, I read it several years ago." And you were like, "Because I would read Sphere. What a good book." And I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to read Sphere again because Mike wants me to read it. And I'm glad I did. I tried to pay more attention this time to the themes and the motif and the ending. And it's just been great. What a great palate cleanser. It's such a well executed book. I've been let down so many times, and just Michael Crichton like doesn't let you down. And so that's what I've been up to reading wise. But I hope you're glad. I hope you're glad that I read Sphere.
What a mind F of an ending too on that one, right? It's so good.
Well, yeah, I won't give any spoilers, but like, let's just say Beth didn't forget. Okay, let's just say Beth didn't forget, and we'll leave it at that. So, yes. So, okay, let's do. I guess we should do now at this point recommendations. I told you guys to come prepared with, I don't know, like a recommendation for what we should read. And I know I brought mine, and I'm hoping you guys brought yours. So let's start with Johanna. What should Mike and I read?
Okay. I read this. Jordan did prep us about these
water, aren't you? No.
What was that?
You're going to say spear cuts through water, aren't you?
No. I didn't even love reading that book, though I do think honestly, I really do think it's a good book, even though I didn't feel like I was a target audience. But
well, this is wish lists. So like what I want to know, sorry, I wasn't clear for the listeners. What books do you guys think that the other two of us should read? And I did do this the first time Mike came on my channel, and Mike, he either recommended it or The Stand, and I did read both it and The Stand, and Mike wasn't happy with my assessment of either one. I gave The Stand a 7 out of 10 and it an 8 out of 10. But what I will just say this. I'll just say this. Whatever you recommend me, I will read. I know like you and Mike are too busy, so like you can choose whether to read like what I recommend or whatever, but I will read what you guys recommend. And so so go ahead, Johanna.
Johanna picks up with like 4,000 pages on hardcover for it.
Oh, how mean.
Yeah.
How mean. No, actually, I was thinking as we were talking earlier, because I know we were talking about 11/22/63 for you, Jordan, but I think I want to, if in case Mike chooses that for you, I think I'm going to go with a different king. So my other favorite king novel right now.
Joe Hill?
What? Joe Hill?
You said another. I'm going to go with another king, and I just thought Stephen King's son, Joe Hill.
Oh no!
Okay.
I didn't mean a different. No. I didn't mean Joe Hill. I haven't even read Joe Hill yet. I was going to pick another Stephen King novel, and the Stephen King novel that's my favorite, in addition to 11/22/63, is Pet Sematary. So I read that last year and was completely blown away. It was my second favorite book of the year last year, and another Dude Bird book maybe, but I think that King nailed it. He nails the themes of grief and death, but with the supernatural twist. I don't know how he's able to do so much depth and still make it so perfectly horror, so perfectly twisted, psychological. I think I actually think that book is a masterpiece, to be honest. I really do. So
it's a top 5 King book for sure.
So like, I've heard only good things about this, and I've wanted to read it for a while. Is it actually scary, Pet Sematary? Or I saw Mike's review of it, and he was just what I got from it is that it's emotionally draining. Is that
it's not a jump scare?
I read it as a teenager, and it scared me for those reasons you wanted to be scared when you read Stephen King. I read it as an adult after having kids, and it was scary for a different reason. You know, as a parent, it's your worst fear is losing a child, right? So I mean, it's got so many things that will F you up emotionally for sure, but it has some legit frights in it, no doubt.
Yes. It's frightening, and
I have nightmares about Pascal.
Yeah, it's not a jump scare kind of frightening story, but it is psychologically terrifying. And actually, I watched the 1980s movie, the one that came out in the 80s.
Zelda is
and I was-
terrifying. Oh my god.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I still remember that scene. I watched that when I was a kid twice, and I remember being fascinated by that movie as a kid. And so reading it as an adult completely blew my mind. Now, honestly, I did listen to the audiobook, which is narrated by Michael C. Hall, but I did pick up the physical copy because there were certain scenes I just had to go back and look at again. I think that one of King's many, many talents is his ability to write domestic conflict. And so something that really pulled me in at the very beginning of the book is this fight between the husband and wife about how to explain death to their daughter. And the fight is so perfectly written the way it escalates. The wife is coming from an emotional place, like, oh, she's not ready for this. How dare you talk about death to our daughter? And you understand why as you read on why she feels that way. Whereas the husband's very rational and he's very solid in his feelings of no, we don't want to sugarcoat things. We need to be straight with our daughter. And he's thinking about it from very rationally, very logically. And you could see why this argument is going to why it's not going to be resolved right away. And I just think King did an incredible job with the dialogue, even use of words like "you never do this" or "you always do that," which are things you're never supposed to say. And
As a
as
couple,
a
yeah.
couple,
You
yeah,
always do this. You never do that.
yeah, big no-nos.
Which is like you don't say that to anyone else in life, but you say it. What was that song? You only hurt the ones you love, the ones you shouldn't hurt at all. Like, yeah, King's so good. Like you see that in It, and I forgot you haven't read yet yet, Johanna, but Mike can testify that there's a lot of this for the first half of It as well. That domestic conflict you're talking about, and it is eerily. Stephen King must have had some blowouts with his own wife. But
He knows how to write dialogue. He is so good with dialogue.
And
And
listening to your feedback, Jordan, I think that I don't see how Pet Sematary would miss with you. The things you kind of feel like you've wanted towards the last third of the other two books, I think you'll get it in that one.
yes,
Okay.
I mean, he goes through all the stages of grief and shows you how your brain changes when you're going through the most destructive cycle of grief possible. It's so well done. It's so incredible. So I would love if you get a chance to check it out. So that would be my recommendation to
Will do.
you. Do I go ahead and give my recommendation to Mike?
For Mike, please. Yes.
Well, this is tough because I have so many that come to mind. At one point, I wanted to recommend you, and I think Rachel from I can't remember Rachel's channel's name now.
Shades of Orange.
Yes, I think she recommended this to you too. I was at one point wanting to recommend to you The Child Thief by Brahm. I know it was on your TBR at one point, but I don't know if I would recommend that one as much anymore. Although I think it's still a really good horror
No,
book.
a viewer actually sent it to me, so I have it. But I
it's yeah. Well, Brahm is an incredible artist too. So the art in there is excellent. I love that book. I adored it. I thought it was so good with the way that he flips a lot of the Peter Pan tropes and makes the captain a really compelling character. But I think, gosh, so part of me wants to recommend The Darkness That Comes Before because I really. So maybe it'll be a choice for you between The Darkness That Comes Before, but another author that. So when I was watching your top 10 authors video the other day, I was thinking you have two authors that are not on your list that I would recommend to you. And so one is Bakker and the other one would be Guy Gavin. Now
Jake's been in my ears for a couple years about this one.
Yeah. But I would not recommend Tigana. I read that one this year and it was by far my least favorite of the three I've read so far. It has some high points, but it has a lot.
Mosaic is the one I've been getting a lot of recently.
Yeah, it's.
What is it? What did you say?
Sarantine Mosaic.
Mm-hmm. I haven't read that yet. I'm going to be reading that this fall.
Okay.
So I'm really excited.
So which one are you angling then?
Then I would recommend the same thing that Jake recommended to me to start with when it comes to Guy Gavin, and that is The Lions of Alrasan.
Okay.
So that one is historical fantasy, so it's evocative of medieval Spain, but you don't have to know about Spanish history to love that book. It is such a good book. It's so beautifully written, and at the same time, it has adventure. It has a great duel. It has really awful, terrible tyrants in the story. It has an amazing found family. And one thing that I love about Kay's writing is that I think we're used to seeing found family tropes in fantasy, but with younger characters, with coming of age characters, which is fine, and I enjoy that. However, Kay is a master of writing found family with adult characters, having people cross paths who who maybe come from different backgrounds and come together at a certain point in their life and form a connection and come together under a common cause. So that's what I love about Kay's writing. I think he just pulls you in. He's an incredible writer. So I will give you a choice: The Darkness That Comes Before or The Lions of Alrazan. But I don't think you can go wrong with
Well,
either
I
one.
have The Darkness That Comes Before, so
I second The Darkness That Comes Before and have not read Lions of Alrazan, though I did read the beginning of Under Heaven, and I was busy and I was on vacation and I wasn't supposed to be reading that, but it was so good. And I was talking to Britton and Kyle a couple of weeks ago, and Kyle was telling me that series, I think it's a 2-book series. It's Under Heaven and then something to do with stars. I forget what the second one was, but I enjoyed it so much. And I said, this is a book I need to like dive. I don't have time right now, but I need to dive into that in the future. So, okay.
Yeah. And if Philip is in the chat, I would say to Philip, if I were to choose a book for Philip to read, I'd say you need to read The Warlord Chronicles, Philip Chase. You need to read The Winter
I didn't
Queen.
know he hadn't read that.
That's
Dude,
right.
if you want to talk about books that were written for a person, I mean,
I know, right? Yeah.
Bernard Cornwell, is that what you're talking about?
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's amazing.
Masterpiece.
I love the Arthurian legend, and I didn't even care about the way that he bent things around. It was that good. So,
I keep getting that recommended to me as well.
Yeah, it was so good. Yeah, it was really
So good. It's so good. My friend Laura from the channel Fantasy Awash, she is actually an expert on Arthurian legend and that period of history. So she just gobbled it up. She gobbled up that trilogy. Now it's her favorite trilogy alongside First Law.
Well, the last 2 things I've been a guest on, this and Phillips, it's just been like a full court press. Make Mike read Prince of Nothing. So I'm thinking that's got a good chance. Yeah.
All right. So I choose The Darkness That Comes Before. For you, Mike.
I totally concur with that.
All right.
All right, Mike, what about you? Johanna laid herself bare on that one. She told you exactly what would work for us. What about you?
And I'm reading this, by the way. So I'm taking this off the table already.
Nice.
Reading that soon.
We'll have to talk about that, Johanna, because that's on my summer TBR.
Well, let me do the pick for Jordan here first, because I got the book in my hand here, and like she said, I'm getting tired of holding this. Anyway, really bad dad jokes. That's what I'm here for, guys. I feel like you're like me in that you're kind of getting sick of the postmodern thing, but I feel like what you do still like is a little bit of deconstruction of kind of like the norms in literature. And you said that you kind of wanted to sit at the cool kids table because you haven't been reading any comics or manga, and I haven't really. I felt kind of bad that last time I recommended an 1,100-page book to you. So let me get something quick, something sweet, but something I think that would be just a perfect entry point for you. And I'm not picking my favorite comic of all time because that's really long. But I think my second favorite comic of all time would be a question, Jordan, is who watches The Watchmen? I think you would absolutely eat this series up because it's very, very, very amazing. And it takes all those things about superheroes that we always thought when we were younger, like asking those questions like, well, how would they do this? Or how would they react in this real situation? And ask all those questions. And it's very dark. It's very messed up. It's very jaded. And it's one of those things where I think the deconstruction has just gotten to a point now where I'm sick of it. But Alan Moore was doing it before it was cool, I think, especially with superheroes. This was the first superhero comics that I read that was dark, gritty. There's those words that we always put together. They're always like, okay, dark, gritty. I get it. We got a little sick of it. This is before that. And I think you'll go back and see so many things in the modern superhero cinema that we're seeing now are all borrowing from this. And if you haven't actually watched the movie of this, read this. Then
I haven't.
I think that the themes I feel like you are into, I think you'll get a lot out of this. And you can read this in a day. It's 12 issues. It's very easy to read. And has some of the most memorable characters ever. I think Rorschach might be one of my favorite characters in any medium ever. Just amazing stuff. But there are so many deep themes in this that I think someone like you would really find a lot to get out of. And again, it's one of the most, I think it's like the best-selling graphic novel of all time. They don't even like to call it a comic book because it is so adult. But it's that for a reason. And I hate that they keep trying to revisit it, because Alan Moore's always like, I told the story I wanted to tell. Quit making sequels to it, or quit putting your own spin on it. And Alan Moore, interesting fellow. I'll put it there. But yeah, Watchmen's amazing. I think you'll love it.
I will read it. So as I promised both of you, I will read what you recommend. I will get to that over the summer. I know nothing about Watchmen?
Yeah.
Watchmen, I've had it recommended to me maybe 30 times by my angsty, like, emo students, and also my brilliant, like, thoughtful, like, really, like, scholarly friends.
Like the meme with the people like shaking, like doing the arm wrestling.
Exactly.
Like,
yes.
Scenes and that's
yes,
kind of what
exactly. I keep getting that recommended to me from all, like, different walks of life, and so I feel like it's finally time. And Britton actually asked that question. I posted that because he asked that before you did.
That's
so apparently that's
I already picked that.
So
Rorschach and the comedian are just two of the greatest characters, man. They're so good.
All right, will do. Okay, what about for Johanna, Mike?
I mean, I wasn't sure where I was going to go, but after this conversation, how can I not tell her Stephen King's It? I mean, oh my God, I had no idea you hadn't done it yet. And what you just talked about, what you liked about Pet Sematary, you can get so much of that because you get 7 different characters and their families about, it's not just that they're being haunted by this 7-foot-tall scary clown with razor sharp teeth. It's also about their home lives and how terrible a lot of these people's homes lives are, growing up. Coming of age, just perfection, but it also, it does it when they're kids, and it also does it when they're adults. And I think reading it after, you've been married, and you've had some real life experience, that stuff's going to really, really click for you on both sides. You're going to get your nostalgia, your coming of age, you can get your real world stuff and see how, maybe life was easier as a kid, even when you're being terrorized by bullies and 7-foot clowns with razor sharp teeth. So I think you will eat that book up, no doubt. Sure, there are things about it that people are going to be like, you shouldn't read it because of this, and you'll love it. 99% of that book, I'm sure you'll love.
I'm sure I'm going to love it. I'm so excited. I'm so happy you chose that for me, by the way. Yeah. And
I'm
because
glad you didn't read it, because I had no idea. I thought you had. All right.
I haven't. No, it's been high on my list, and I will read The Stand someday. But I'll be honest, I've been scared of The Stand because dystopian is not a buzzword for me, and I think that's dystopian. But it sounds phenomenal. I've heard so many great things.
Have you seen any of the movies?
Haven't.
Oh, okay.
Actually, no, that's not true. I watched some of the, I want to say 1980s, 90s movie when I was a kid, but I don't really remember much of it. I remember I just remember feeling kind of creeped out by it, but I don't even think I saw the whole thing.
Yeah, you'll get some of that in there. So Pennywise, obviously a legendary character, but that 90s TV series was really watered down with what happens in the book.
Oh,
so it's messed up, but again, 7 coming of age stories. Obviously it sounds like something that was written for me, but it was one of those things. I read it as a teenager, and I didn't have any real world experience yet. You're still a kid. So I just I like that part, but I felt like the adult part, I was like, it's not my favorite or whatever. Read it again as an adult. This is amazing. It's like reading again for the first time. So I think you'll like it a lot.
I'm certain I'm going to love it. I'm going to see if I can prioritize it for spooky season. So thank you.
Outstanding.
Yeah. What about us, Jordan? Are you
recommending
a book
for us?
He's
going to so I guess I'll start with Mike. Yes, Mike, I've tried to get you to read Alastair Reynolds, and I know that you'll love him, but I know that's a big ask and it's a big commitment, and you're intimidated by him. Who would it be?
Revelation Space?
What's that?
Would it be Revelation Space?
No, I knew that's what I recommended last time, and you still haven't read it, and I knew you'd guess that. So, of course, I want you to read Revelation Space. I would literally up my Patreon monthly thing that I give you for you to read Revelation Space. I so badly want you to experience that, because I know you'll love it, and it's dense, again, in a different way than Stephen Erickson. It's something that if you go slow with it, you'll just love it. But
what is your pitch? Really quickly, what is your pitch for Revelation Space? Because I've heard you mention it a few times now, and I don't know what it's about.
My pitch for Revelation Space is Alastair Reynolds is an astrophysicist. He worked for the European Space Union. He was a working astrophysicist, and while he was on the job in planetariums and research stations looking at the stars, he was writing his first fantasy novel. He incorporates really big, profound science fictional ideas. So he is, it's dense, I would call it cyber gothic space opera. In the future, people are a little more nihilistic, a little more sort of Machiavellian. In the future, there are alpha and beta simulations. So if you lose your father actually has spoken into AI for 100 hours, and you can upload his personality and keep him with you on your journey. Alistair Reynolds just is a big idea sci-fi writer. Black holes and time travel and all sorts of big weird space ideas. Revelation Space is what I like about Alistair Reynolds is he's one of the few compelling hard sci-fi writers who can set a story 1,000,000 years in the future and it feels compelling. If you read a book like House of Suns, yes, he's dense, but he's dense in a way that's extremely accessible for me. It's logical, it's linear, it is engaging with cutting edge science. The verisimilitude, he makes everything seem like, even if it's set 1,000 years in the future, you're utterly convinced that this could be what the future looks like. Everyone's like goth and has piercings and is modified to some degree. It's this very like beautiful, if you're in a nihilistic mood and you just want this seriously put on like 9-inch nails and put that like in your earphones and like pick up like Revelation Space. And there's xenoarchaeology and all sorts of weird. When you read Revelation Space, your mind's going to be blown. And it's all compelling and interesting, and the physics make sense. And but you asked me to make a pitch for that. I was not going, because Mike does what he wants. He will not read that.
I owe you one, Jordan. So here's what I'll say before you start. If you give me something that's less than 500 pages and it's a standalone, I'm going to do it.
But it's not less than 500 pages. Okay, I will give you something less than 500 pages. Have you read Robert A. Heinlein's The Moon is a Harsh Mistress?
I've only read, Starship Troopers?
Oh, fantastic. Okay, so I pulled this out of my library here. This is 1966. It's just exiting out of the golden age of sci-fi and entering into the new wave. It's got the feel kind of both. So the basic plot is that a lunar colony, it's technically an open prison colony, but actually it feels more cyberpunk than that. And it's basically this lunar colony rebels against Earth's control. The Earth is Terra, and Terra is being unfair with the taxes and telling them what to do and stealing their wealth. No taxation without representation, that sort of thing. So basically the Luna people start an uprising, and it turns into this independence movement that very much mirrors the American Revolution. This book is not terribly long. It's about 400 pages. So not very long as far as these things go. Right. There's an artificial intelligence computer named Mike that you would like very much. The whole novel is written in this sort of mock dialect Russian accent, and it's extremely exciting. The plot is just really fast moving. You'll probably, Mike, have heard of the novel's slogan, Tannstaffel, there ain't no such thing as a free lunch, which is all about opportunity cost and the fact that at the end of the day, you can say that certain things are free, but nothing actually is free. Sure. I just think you'll really love it. It's so well written. It's my favorite Robert Heinlein novel, and I hope you put that on your TBR in the future.
I'm going to write it down right now. The Moon is a Harsh Mistress?
The Moon is a Harsh Mistress. Totally a modern classic. So I hope you do that.
I mean, I love Starship Troopers.
Yeah, I read that too.
They're both different.
Stranger in a Strange Land.
Yeah.
Stranger in a Strange Land. Yeah.
I haven't read that one yet, so that's a hole in my sci-fi knowledge. But I know you'd like this. I know you like kind of history, and I know you're remotely interested in political science and these types of books. I think you'd really like it. Okay, Johanna. So I actually think I was torn. This was really hard because I wanted to recommend you not a fantasy or science fiction book, but I decided ultimately to go with C.J. Cherry's Down Below Station. So I have the nice like Easton Press version of this, and so this is again, what's her name? CJ Cherry is Cynthia Janice Cherry, and so I actually taught this book several years ago when I was running a fantasy and sci-fi lit course. So this is part of Cherry's Alliance Union universe. I would describe it as hard science fiction in some ways because it's so realistic, but I'd also describe it as sort of like when you're reading it, it has the feel of like a really gripping episodic ship fleet TV series. The characters are really great. The plot is gripping. It's a bit like The Expanse, but maybe more thought-provoking and certainly more dense. There are some really cool big ideas explored related to memory and human identity. There's some really cool cultural and planetary exploration stuff. It's basically the Earth Company, this enormously wealthy and powerful private company, is now the thing that explores space, kind of like SpaceX. So it doesn't seem like it's that far away. And we've spread out into the stars, and we've discovered like a bunch of different star systems that we can get to, but there aren't planets suitable for colonization. So space stations are built in orbit instead. And they finally find this planet called Pell's World. And they find that it's not only habitable, but it's already populated by these almost Ewok, these like these gentle creatures called the Hisa. So they build this station over it called Pell Station. I know Brian Lee Durfee loves this book. They call this planet Down Below, hence Down Below Station, because the station's above it. So it's all about this journey to like colonize this planet. And there are all these problems and political implications because there's a war going on at the same time, and these different factions are all battling for control of different territories. There's the company faction and the union faction, and there's just so much, Johanna. There's political intrigue and refugees and sabotage and crossing lines. Again, it's like a ship fleet show that is so thoughtful and well written. It's brilliant. I believe it won a Hugo and a Nebula. It's just and then it's like there are 27 books in this series. And so I just feel like I want you to read that.
Just the first one though, right?
That's the one that everyone reads first. Yeah.
Okay. Have you read the whole series or?
No, I've only read this book and I've taught it. So I have not read the whole series. And I know there are other books like Foreigner and Cytine, and CJ Cherry she's still alive. She's just a prolific author. And this one is a classic. Like I taught it in my class, and I found that 2 of my students had already read it because their parents had asked them to read it. So it's one of those like classics that was huge in its day, but people seem to have forgotten about it. And I would love to see it make a comeback, like these things do.
I'm pretty sure I've heard of this author before because I think she's one of the authors that Janny Wirtz has talked about, because Janny Wirtz has made a big deal about a ton of female fantasy and sci-fi writers from the 90s or 80s that people we've just forgotten over time. They haven't gotten as much attention over the years. So she's been trying really hard to get people to bring attention back to these writers.
She's right.
I'm pretty sure John from Talking Story said in one of his last videos that he was picking up, I want to say it was that author, CJ Cherry, a book by her as a result of Janny Wirtz's recommendation. So yes, I will read it. And I've been on a big sci-fi kick this year. So I will add it to my sci-fi TBR.
It's dense, but I just think you guys will love it. Okay, there's kind of like, I want to cut this off at like 2 hours. There's like one last question I want to ask you guys. If you're up for it, do you have the time, guys?
Sure.
All right. And so this was a question that, and I hope we all read each other's books. I know I'm going to read yours. No pressure.
I'm over here adjusting my schedule right now.
Okay.
I love you too.
Yeah, I will figure it out. I will get to it eventually, and I'm going to message you when I read it since you've had the book before.
That'd be great.
So, yeah.
Another thing I wanted to ask you guys about is just your thoughts about the health of the industry in general. And I'm talking about the publishing world, but especially fantasy literature. And I remember, Johanna, that you made this great video with Tori, And it was about this trend that we're seeing of publishers being less interested in publishing epic fantasy. I'm seeing videos pop up about this like weekly. I saw one by Patrick and Library of a Viking and several others, just about how the industry is doing this cozy fantasy and romantasy thing instead of epic fantasy, and how agents and publishers are really looking for like shorter books. And that definitely feels true. I mean, just going through the process of trying to get published, I can tell you like legit, that is what they're looking for. So my question is, what are your thoughts on that? Why do you think this is happening? In some ways, it seems like a lot of these agents and editors and publishers are out of touch with what a lot of people I know personally want to read, and like the people I follow, big booktubers, but also like my colleagues who have no interest in booktube but just love to read, are like, what is going on? You know, and I understand that maybe like some of this is pushing back on, you know, as Mike said earlier, this trend in fantasy of just having these 300,000 word books that just go on and on. It's like that famous Blaise Pascal quote, I would have written a shorter letter, but I didn't have the time. So I understand why people want these books to be a little more like truncated and a little more. Anyways, I guess my point is what do you think of this whole trend? Do you think it's happening? Why do you think it's happening? What are your thoughts?
Yes and no. I feel like this happens every decade. Is adult fantasy, is epic fantasy dying? Every decade this happens, and it's one of those things where, like, as a business major, I can tell you, of course, they're going to follow the money. Romantasy is making Taylor Swift money right now, so of course they're going to chase that. That's what they want, more of that. I get it from a business standpoint. I also think that we're talking about shorter books. That's real. Why do you guys think that long form content's not getting as much attention on YouTube anymore? The attention spans are getting shorter, right? That's why. I mean, we got a whole generation now that's grown up on TikTok. They expect it to get straight to the point. I mean, I get told all the time, oh, it took you 45 seconds to actually start talking about the book. Sorry, I didn't realize you didn't have that much time.
Bradbury predicted this.
But yes, exactly. So I'm saying, yeah, that's very real. But the thing is, like, I feel like it always bounces back. I mean, look, let's just look back at the last time this happened in the mid 2000s. Oh, well, Twilight exploded. All of a sudden, the fantasy shelf at the bookstores got shorter, and the paranormal adult fiction got longer, right? Young adult fiction, that got longer and longer. And everybody thought, oh, well, you know, fantasy's dead. You know, the fake vampire love stories have taken it over. That eventually ran its course, and then epic fantasy started making a comeback. What I think that we have now to combat that we didn't have then, is people are taking self-pub a lot more seriously than they used to. A lot of people, myself included, up until even recently, had always looked at self-pub as you're not good enough to get picked up by a publishing company. And that was very ignorant on my behalf. I've learned so much about, okay, well, you have so many rules, I guess you would say, so many things where they take your book and they say, okay, this is great, but you got to take this out, you got to take this out, and you got to add this in, you got to add this in. It's like, you're just completely took the soul out of my book. And, you know, if that's the only one going to get published, okay, well, they have options now. We have Kickstarter, we have crowdfunding, we have things that we didn't have before. Just talking to Ryan, I learned so much about the self-publishing game, because I used to think, I remember I first talked about Michael J. Sullivan about this, like how much courage it'd take to leave orbit and start your own. He's like, well, now I'm actually making money and writing what I want to write. So it wasn't hard at all. And that was my first moment where it's like, oh, okay, I had no idea. I thought that was really a risk. So I think once you've built that audience, you can take that risk. But if you're someone like Ryan, who apparently has cracked the code of finding out how to build an audience and still do what you want to do. And I think in the end, it's just word of mouth is a lot more important now than it ever was before. And we have more options to get that word of mouth out. You've got these authors who understand, yeah, you know what, going on YouTube and talking to these people is going to get me a lot more attention than talking to some magazine article about my self-pub book, you know. So there's a lot more options now than there used to be. So I think you'll see a lot more people like us that will get more interested in self-pub and realize it's there. And eventually the Sarah J. Maas fans will grow up and they'll not be reading and buying those books anymore. And you got to go back to, hey, fantasy's there for the people who want it. But, you know, as far as like bookstores and stuff not carrying as much, I mean, honestly, guys, look, I love going to bookstores as much as anybody. do you really go to bookstores to buy your books anymore? Or do you buy them online at this point? I feel like most of us buy our books online or from a used secondhand bookstore. You know, I don't feel like there's a lot of us who are like, I'm going to Barnes and Noble to find me a new fantasy series to read. Right?
2/3 of the time I go online because it's just vastly cheaper,
It's
and I'm a
cheaper,
working
and
teacher.
also we'll watch a video off YouTube and say, "Oh, I really want to get this book," and you go on Barnes and Noble and you can't find it, right? You know, so we'll go online to get it. So I
But
feel like that's really how it is, because we fantasy fans, we will dig for our recommendations.
yeah,
And we know exactly what we want before we want. We don't go into a bookstore saying, "I need to find something." We've got lists of things we need to read or we want to read, right?
that's very true. I would say I do buy about 2/3 of my books online, and I try not to aid in the Amazon monopoly factory thing that's going on, because, to be honest, one of the things that worries me as a publishing trend about it just in general is that Amazon now controls 80% of the book market.
Yeah.
And Amazon does ban things. And just from a general, I think we could all agree on this, just from a neutral free speech perspective, Amazon now bans books that they don't consider to be like books that are savory for them at whatever present moment. And then they will unban them secretly whenever the moment is passed.
Yeah.
It's very Orwellian. And
I didn't know that, by the way.
What's that?
I didn't realize that.
Yeah, they do. They ban stuff whenever it becomes politically inconvenient.
And then when
They
everybody
ban
stops
stuff
complaining about it, they'll undo it, not tell
Yeah,
them.
like, not to be political at all, just as a general neutral free speech perspective, like, they banned a documentary about Clarence Thomas. They banned a book about gender. On the other side of the aisle, they banned a book about Israel Palestine. Whenever it just gets too hot, they'll ban it. And the problem with that is it creates a chilling effect for speech. And what happens is that, honestly, just quite honestly, you talked about the market and just the incentives of the business. If it looks even slightly like Amazon might not publish this book that some young, enterprising, smart author wants to publish, if it even slightly looks like this is the type of book that Amazon won't publish right now, it ain't getting published by the big, whatever, 5, big 4, big 6, whatever it happens to be, publishers. And I hate that chilling effect on speech. But I will say that I go to Barnes and Noble to have serendipitous experiences, to walk through the aisles and just like look at the titles and go like, what is going to catch my eye? And then I'll like sit down in the Starbucks and I'll read a few chapters and I'll go home with that book. So I do a little bit of both. I think they're both valuable. Like, yeah, like
I find that before BookTube, before I had a lot of recommendations already in my pocket. So yeah, I used to do that. Yeah.
So I guess
Go ahead, Johanna.
Sorry. Well, obviously we have to, I mean, you have to acknowledge capitalism, as Mike was basically saying, with everything, with what's selling.
They got to follow the money, so I understand
it. And as far as Amazon is concerned, that's really concerning, for one thing. At the same time, that's also challenging, because I've also heard that with self-published books, Amazon is the only place to get certain self-published books too.
Right.
So that's also weighs into the challenge here. But I do agree with everything that Mike said. I think that this is a trend and that trends come and go. And because it's a trend, thank you so much for shouting out the discussion I had with Tori. I am very proud of that discussion. I think we went into a lot of depth and also
it was awesome.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I know Patrick acknowledged it in his video as well. And so greatly appreciate the shout out about that. We did talk in depth too about what we mean by the term epic fantasy, as opposed to just books that are long, because I don't think books necessarily have to be long to be epic.
Right. Ursula Le Guin is a good example of how that's not necessarily, it doesn't have to be that your epic fantasy is 1,100 pages, right?
Yeah.
Brandon Sanderson.
Yeah, exactly. And so, I mean, I think that there are a lot of different ways of understanding what that term means. And even when we come to an agreement about what a genre or subgenre means, most books don't follow a genre convention 100% of the time with any genre in any form of literature. But we did have a really good discussion, I thought, Tori and me, and much support to indie fantasy, as Tori is an epic fantasy author, self-published epic fantasy author. What I would say, though, just as an addition to that conversation, and I don't know that we covered it as much in that discussion, though I did bring it up in a different discussion I was in with Jenny Wirtz and celebrating the finish of her epic fantasy series, which is that I feel like I'm hearing a lot of discussion about romantasy and cozy fantasy as being in opposition to fantasy and epic fantasy. And what I would say is, one, I consider romantasy a subgenre of fantasy very much. And two, I don't think these things have to be at odds with each other. I know for me personally, I don't read a lot of romantasy. I don't know if I've read like maybe 2 mass books, and honestly, they weren't for me. I wasn't a big fan, but I know plenty of people. I know plenty of people who love Sarah J. Maas
My students.
right alongside Malazan. Like they don't have to be in opposition with each
Right.
other. People can enjoy a variety of subgenres. Just because you love science fiction doesn't mean you don't love fantasy. I think this also speaks to that issue I was talking about earlier, where BookTube kind of portrays a different portrait of that, because in order to be successful on BookTube, you kind of have to stay in your lane. But even those of us, who are on BookTube, a lot of us read other genres too. So I don't think it necessarily has to be that way. I don't think we have to think of, oh, these people who are reading romantasy or the romantasy industry is against the fantasy industry. Publishers are just selling what's selling. And, if you're wanting to see more epic fantasy, I would say read more epic fantasy, talk about epic fantasy.
Right.
All you could do, I'm a big, huge believer that if there's any sort of issue, even social issue that is bothering you, go for what you're for rather than what you're against. So if you want more epic fantasy, if you want publishers to see this stuff sells, buy epic fantasy, talk about epic fantasy, just bring more attention to epic fantasy. So I guess that would be my response to that.
I think the pendulum will swing back, and it always does. It always does.
Yeah, I'm certain that's true. I mean, I'm sure, like, for example, when the Game of Thrones TV show came out, every single book out there was trying to be the next Game of Thrones, right? So I'm sure, like, in House of the Dragon,
that's still happening on TV. Like, they even tried to. You're really going to make Avatar: The Last Airbender Game of Thrones-ish? Really? Come on. It just.
I do love Avatar: The Next Airbender, but I would never say it's.
Oh, I love the animated one. I just watched it, but the live action one, I'm like, they were like, oh, we got to cater to the Game of Thrones audience too.
Oh, I haven't watched that. Yeah.
Yeah.
No. Yeah. So yeah, I guess I feel very much the same way as Mike, though. I do think it's a trend. I do think it's not the end of epic fantasy. I think we'll see plenty of
Since
epic
I was
fantasy.
old enough to remember the fantasy genre, they've been talking about fantasy was dying. So, I mean, that was older than both of y'all, so it's been a bit, So in the 80s, it was dying, and then Terry Brooks made people realize it wasn't dying. And, but people give Terry Brooks crap, but I was like, it was kind of like on life support at that time, and he put it back in the mainstream. And this happens all the time. Like, I mean, the 2000s is epic fantasy dying, and the Lord of the Rings movies blew up. And then they just start all over again. There'll always be something like that.
Yeah. But there also is an evolution too, right? I mean, you can notice differences in the way that fantasy is written today versus the way it was written in Le Guin's time. Sure. So I think that is certainly going to be the case. But I'm actually kind of excited about it too. I think we're going to see some new and different stuff in the future.
Well, I am seeing just a trend of indie publishing that is, I mean, look, again, I actually am a capitalist. I do think to paraphrase Winston Churchill, capitalism is the worst system in the world except for all the others. He was talking about democracy, obviously. And I wouldn't want to live under any other system, even if it has to be mixed. But I will say that what that has opened up is an indie market for this precisely this type of epic fantasy, like Philip Chase's Way of Edan. Like, if you want that, it's available. Okay, maybe the gatekeepers aren't having it right now with traditional publishing. Maybe they don't want your epic traditional fantasy with, archetypes and tropes that are a little bit more traditional. Fine, you can still get that published, and it's never been easier to do that. And indie editors will attest they're flourishing, they're thriving. Indie artists are flourishing and thriving. And so I don't, as you say, Johanna, I don't think it has to be a zero-sum game. I don't think that one thing has to come at the expense of the other. By the way, yes, Rogue 6, I will attest that C.S. Friedman, this is Celia Friedman's, we've had her on the channel, her Coldfire trilogy. I've only read the first book, Black Sun Rising, but I almost recommended this to Johanna. It's one of the best speculative fiction novels I've ever read. It's science fantasy, but it takes place on this planet called Urna, which, anyways, it's this planet that's like seismically active, and there's this Fey energy force. As Mike, it's very similar to Sphere and like Solaris, where on this planet, the things that you dream and your nightmares get manifested. And so yes, thank you for mentioning that to anyone. I would recommend C.S. Friedman's Coldfire trilogy. She's still writing. She's still productive and active. And it's such a just great creative book. Sorcerers can like control the Fae, and there's warrior priests, and the plot is just great.
That sounds so cool.
It is, and I know like people like Alan don't like the word underrated, and I respect that, but like it's one of the most underrated sci-fi fantasy novels ever. It's just it's so good. It's so creative, and it draws on traditions that we all like, and it is really good. Please, anyone out there, if this is reaching you, read C.S. Friedman. She's brilliant, and she's written so many books, and she doesn't get enough credit. And but guys, thanks for joining me. This was wonderful. Loved catching up with you guys, and yeah, just thanks for doing this, and it was lovely chatting with you.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for having me.
Yes, thanks for having me too.
And thank you guys for recommendations.
Yes, thank you for your recommendations.
I didn't have enough of them, so thank you.
I love recommendations. I know it's hard to
never
get
get tired of
everything into your TBR, but I love especially personalized recommendations.
I love getting recommendations of something that I don't get recommended nonstop too. So that's really nice.
I think we did that.
Not necessarily like something that's like under the radar, but just, everyone will hit you with the same book, after a while. And so when you get new ones, it's nice.
All right. Thanks, guys. I'm going to say goodbye to everyone. Thanks for those of you at home who joined us. And until next time, happy reading. Ta-ta.